The day I pointed my gun at the secretary. I was almost certain he worked for the CEO, not just worked for her, worked with her. Every single lie, every missing employee, every suspicious shell company, every dirty rupee that disappeared into offshore accounts. I truly believed he was a part of it all, but I was wrong. I was wrong about him. And I was also wrong about this being just another standard money laundering investigation. If only I'd known then what was actually waiting inside Warehouse 12, I might have walked away while I still had the chance, 3 days earlier. By the time I arrived at work the following morning, the rumor had already grown legs. No, it had grown legs, wings, and an entirely new imagination. I pushed my cleaning cart across the marble lobby while conversations bounced from one corner of the building to another. I heard he carried her all the way outside. Wonder she keeps him as her personal secretary. They actually look so good together. Someone nearby even sighed dreamily. I wish someone would carry me like that. I lowered my head and simply continued mopping. If I tried to correct every false rumor people spread in this building, I would never finish waxing the floors. Besides, nobody ever stopped to ask the most obvious question, if the secretary had supposedly carried the CEO. Then why had the woman in his arms been wearing a bright blue cleaning staff jacket apparently when gossip becomes exciting enough? Logic politely excuses itself from the room. I dipped my mop back into the bucket, trying very hard not to smile. Congratulations to me, I had somehow become an invisible extra in my own rescue. The strangest part of all this wasn't the office gossip, it was her. Our CEO never addressed the rumor, not even once. There was no official denial. No clarification. There was not even a disciplinary email reminding employees to maintain professionalism. Nothing at all. She simply walked through the office exactly as she always did, elegant, untouchable, cold enough to make polished marble seem warm by comparison. Whenever the whispers followed her down the hall, she merely continued walking. She looked almost amused by it all. I watched her disappear into the private executive elevator before looking down at the ripples in my bucket of water. Why stay silent? Was she simply using the rumor as a calculated distraction, or did she actually enjoy their attention for one ridiculous second? I even wondered, did she actually like him? Unfortunately, the secretary himself wasn't nearly as distracted by the rumors as everyone else. If anything, he had become significantly busier. At first I thought I was just imagining things, then I started paying very close attention. He wasn't just making small talk with the staff, he was systematically collecting information. I borrow last quarter's warehouse inventory, I heard him ask one morning. Which warehouse? The clerk replied, the old one, Warehouse 12. Yes, he said smoothly. Oh, I am just curious. Curious, that single word appeared far too often in his daily vocabulary later that afternoon. I watched him stop beside the human resources desk. Many employees resigned last month, he asked casually. The HR manager frowned. I would have to check the system for that. Rush at all, he replied with a smile. Thank you, he offered a polite nod and walked away. Half an hour later, he was chatting with the accounting department. These invoice numbers seem to skip a sequence. They do, the accountant asked, surprised. Probably just misread them, he offered with another effortless smile. Another apology, another notebook quietly filled with data. He spoke so casually that most people forgot his questions 5 seconds after he left the room. But I didn't forget, because absolutely none of his questions were random. Warehouses, night shifts, ghost payroll networks, missing invoices, missing employees. He wasn't gathering harmless workplace gossip. He was building a complex puzzle. The real question was, who exactly was he building it for the next 2 days? I caught him absolutely everywhere. He was talking to security guards. He was carefully studying delivery schedules. He was reading through archived maintenance requests. He was even pretending to organize the CEO's calendar while secretly memorizing sensitive finance reports. He was good, extremely good. He was almost good enough to fool me, almost, that night. I returned to the executive floor long after everyone else had gone home for the day. My cleaning uniform was incredibly useful for this. No one ever questioned a janitor carrying a mop after official office hours. What they would question was a janitor unlocking the restricted executive archive room. I quietly slipped inside. I closed the door behind me, then I pulled on a pair of tight gloves. The archive smelled heavily like old paper and expensive secrets, financial records, board meeting minutes, property acquisitions. Everything was exactly where I had expected it to be. But exactly where I was not expecting anyone was right behind me, working late. The calm, deep voice behind me almost made me reach for the tactical knife hidden beneath my sleeve. Instead, I slowly turned around. The secretary leaned casually against the doorway. His hands were buried in his pockets. His expression was completely unreadable. I forced myself to smile first. Oh, I forgot my mop. His sharp eyes drifted toward the filing cabinet I had left half open. You forgot it on the executive floor. "It is an expensive mop," I replied smoothly. A heavy silence fell over the room. He just looked at me, and I looked right back at him. Neither of us blinked. Finally, he stepped aside from the doorway, clearing my path. "Try not to forget it again." "I will do my absolute best," I murmured as I walked past him. I felt his intense eyes follow me all the way to the elevator doors. He did not believe a single word I had just said. Unfortunately for him, neither did I after that night. Something drastically changed between us. I began noticing him far more often, not because I wanted to, but because he was suddenly everywhere I looked, every secret hallway I tried to investigate. He somehow appeared every storage room I attempted to search. He casually walked past every document I planned to photograph. He somehow managed to reach first. Either he was incredibly lucky, or he had officially started investigating me. Neither of those possibilities was comforting. The answer arrived the following evening. I was cleaning outside the executive offices when two junior accountants wandered past my station. "Oh, that secretary," one of them asked with a laugh. I heard he was asking about the janitor. "New one, yeah, wanted to know exactly where she worked before coming to this company." "What did he find?" "Nothing. There are absolutely no records." I kept my head lowered until their voices completely disappeared around the corner. Then I quietly wrung out my mop. So he was officially asking questions about me now, about my background, about my employment history. He was hunting for information about a woman who technically did not even exist, that wasn't just harmless curiosity anymore, that was active surveillance, which meant our little game had officially begun. The perfect opportunity presented itself much sooner than I expected. It was late Friday afternoon. The main lobby was overflowing with employees rushing to leave for the weekend. The secretary stood near the reception desk, speaking intensely with one of the company directors. His executive access card hung neatly from the pocket of his tailored black suit. He was close enough. I pushed my heavy cleaning cart forward into the crowd. A receptionist stepped sideways without looking. Someone else bumped right into my bucket. It was absolutely perfect. The cart tilted just enough to create a scene. Soapy water splashed heavily across the polished marble floor. 3 nearby employees jumped backward to save their shoes. The secretary instinctively turned his head toward the sudden commotion. "Careful," he murmured. "I'm so sorry," I gasped. I knelt down immediately, pretending to panic as I reached for a fallen cleaning cloth. As I moved, my left hand brushed lightly against the side of his suit jacket. It was barely a touch. It lasted less than a single second. Then I smoothly withdrew my hand. The entire exchange looked like nothing more than a clumsy janitor frantically apologizing for making a mess. By the time the floor was wiped dry, a tracking device no larger than a shirt button rested completely unnoticed beneath the inner seam of his jacket. I stood back up. I bowed apologetically to him. Then I calmly returned to my cart without looking back. As I walked away, I finally allowed myself the smallest smile. "Let us see where you actually go after office hours, Mr. Secretary." At exactly 2:17 in the morning, the tracker finally came to life. The tiny monitor resting beside my cup of stale vending machine coffee emitted a soft beep. I blinked awake immediately. For 3 nights, that little blinking dot had behaved exactly as expected. Office, apartment, office, apartment. It was completely predictable. It was almost disappointingly so, but tonight, it suddenly veered left. It wasn't heading toward the upscale apartment complex where the company's executives lived. It wasn't heading toward the city center. It wasn't even heading toward the river road. Instead, the dot drifted farther and farther into the industrial outskirts until the glowing streets disappeared from the map altogether. I frowned at the screen. "Where exactly are you going?" I whispered. 15 minutes later, I had traded my janitor's uniform for black tactical clothing and was riding an old motorcycle through the nearly deserted streets. The city looked entirely different after midnight. Glass towers gave way to rusted warehouses. Neon lights surrendered to broken street lamps. Even the air smelled older. It smelled like damp concrete, dust, engine oil. The tracker finally stopped moving. I parked nearly a block away, cutting the engine before easing the motorcycle behind the skeletal remains of a collapsed warehouse wall. A heavy silence settled around me. Only the distant hum of electricity and the occasional barking of stray dogs disturbed the night. Carefully, I climbed onto the second floor of an abandoned factory overlooking the road below. The cracked windows offered the absolute perfect vantage point. Right on time. A black sedan rolled quietly into the empty lot. The secretary stepped out of the vehicle. Even dressed casually in a charcoal jacket and dark jeans, he somehow still looked as though he had walked straight out of a fashion magazine. It was annoyingly unfair. He checked his surroundings exactly once. He didn't do it dramatically. It was just the kind of quick, practiced glance someone develops after years of watching their own back. Then he waited. Exactly 3 minutes later, another car arrived at the lot. An older man climbed out. He looked to be in his mid-50s. He wore a plain grey shirt. There was no insignia, no official vehicle, no security escort, no badge. The two men didn't even shake hands. They simply stood close enough to avoid raising their voices. I adjusted the zoom lens on my camera. The secretary smoothly slipped a thick brown envelope into the man's hands. The older man tucked it beneath his arm without even opening it to check the contents. Was it money? Was it documents? Either possibility was bad news. They exchanged only a few quiet sentences before the older man nodded once and returned to his car. There were no smiles, no pleasantries, it was just strict business. I clicked several photographs in rapid succession. The shutter of my camera was nearly silent. Years of elite training had taught me exactly how to document a secret meeting without ever becoming a part of it. Still, my thoughts were racing. A secret midnight meeting, a cash-sized brown envelope, no identification, no witnesses. Wonderful, the ridiculously handsome secretary wasn't just working for the CEO, he was bribing corrupt police officers too. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, something deeply bothered me. If he truly worked for the CEO, why risk meeting someone personally? Why not send another employee to do the dirty work? Why come all this way himself? The questions lingered long after the older man's car disappeared into the darkness. The secretary remained standing for another minute before turning toward his own vehicle. Halfway there, he suddenly stopped. My heartbeat completely stalled, slowly, almost lazily. He turned his head toward the abandoned factory where I was hiding. He didn't look directly at me, just enough that the moonlight caught the sharp outline of his profile. Our eyes couldn't possibly meet from this distance. Could they? He lingered right there for 2 incredibly long seconds, then he simply got into his car and drove away. I didn't move, not for another full minute. Only after his taillights vanished into the night did I finally exhale, close, far too close still. If he had actually noticed me, surely he would have investigated the area, but he hadn't, which meant my hiding position had remained completely secure, or so I believed at the time. The tracker began moving once again on my monitor against my better judgment. I followed him. This time the secretary drove even farther away from the city. He finally stopped outside an abandoned municipal records office. The building had been scheduled for demolition years ago. It looked entirely dead. Its shattered windows stared back at me like empty eye sockets. There were no lights, no guards, no logical reason for anyone to be there, which, in my operational experience, made it the perfect place to hide dangerous secrets. I circled around the back and climbed up a rusted fire escape. I kept moving until I found another broken window overlooking the second floor. Inside, the secretary wasn't searching through old files. He was actively working, methodically, professionally. He opened a sleek black equipment case and removed a compact surveillance camera. Then he pulled out another one, a directional microphone, signal repeaters, encrypted transmitters, high-capacity battery packs. Every single movement was highly practiced, measured, perfectly efficient. He fixed the camera high in a corner where even I almost failed to notice it. The microphone disappeared inside a damaged ceiling vent. A signal repeater was hidden behind a loose electrical panel. My pulse quickened. Nobody carries high-end equipment like that just for fun. Nobody installs an observation network that's sophisticated unless they belong to law enforcement or organized crime. Considering everything I had witnessed tonight, one possibility suddenly seemed far more likely than the other. I tightened my grip on the wooden windowsill. So this was it, the charming secretary. Office heartthrob, the man everyone insisted was secretly dating our CEO. He wasn't just close to her, he was helping protect her illegal operation. I had been looking for the mastermind's right hand, and all along he had been the one delivering her morning coffee. The irony would have been highly amusing, if it weren't so incredibly dangerous. As I adjusted my camera to take another photograph, a floorboard beneath my heavy boot gave the faintest creak. The secretary froze instantly. Every instinct inside me screamed at me to duck. I dropped flat below the window just as his sharp gaze swept toward my hiding place. Total silence. There were no footsteps, no voices, absolutely nothing. 5, 10, 15 seconds slowly passed when I cautiously peeked back inside. The room was completely empty. The black equipment case was gone. The secretary had vanished without making a single sound. I stared into the deserted room, my heartbeat echoing loudly in my ears. For the second time that night, I had narrowly avoided being caught, or perhaps, for the second time that night, he had simply chosen to let me go, and somehow, that possibility unsettled me far more than being discovered ever could. Monday mornings are cruel enough without discovering that the man you have been secretly stalking has apparently decided to become your personal headache. I discovered this at exactly 8:03 in the morning. The executive elevator doors were just closing when a firm hand suddenly slipped between them. They slid open again. And there he was, the secretary. He was perfectly dressed, he was perfectly composed. and he was looking entirely too awake for someone I had watched installing military-grade surveillance equipment at 2 in the morning. His sharp eyes dropped to my cleaning cart, then they drifted up to me, then they went right back to the cart. Morning. I tightened my grip around the cart handle. Is it? One corner of his mouth moved into a slight smirk. Usually, yes. He stepped inside the tight space, the doors closed. I stared straight ahead at the metal wall. He stood right beside me, close enough that I could smell faint coffee and whatever expensive cologne the company's salary scale apparently allowed him to afford. The elevator began climbing, total silence. 10 seconds passed, 20 seconds then. You look tired. I slowly turned my head toward him. So do you. I had a very late night, he murmured. I looked at him. He looked right back at me, neither of us blinked. Cleaning, he asked casually. Among other things, I replied, his eyebrow lifted slightly. Other things, I smiled as pleasantly as I could manage. Very dirty things. A brief pause fell between us. Sounds difficult. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. I might, he offered softly. The elevator continued its steady journey upward. I could practically hear the complex gears turning inside his head. He definitely knew something, and I knew something, but neither of us knew exactly what the other one knew. It was a completely absurd situation. And somehow, standing right beside him with a mop bucket between us, I found myself fighting the urge to smile. He glanced down at my uniform. You have something on your sleeve. My attention immediately snapped down to my arm. There was absolutely nothing there when I looked back up. He was genuinely smiling. I stared coldly at him. He stared right back. That wasn't funny. I thought it was, he shrugged. I will remember that. I was counting on it. Elevator chimed loudly, the doors slid open. I immediately pushed my heavy cart out into the hallway behind me. His deep voice followed. Try not to work too hard. I didn't bother to turn around. Try not to ask too many questions. Absolute silence followed me down the corridor. Then, who said I ask questions? I stopped dead in my tracks. I slowly looked back over my shoulder, but he was already walking away down the corridor. That man was going to be a massive problem. A very attractive problem, which frankly made him even more irritating to deal with. The very first thing I did after that was hide his warehouse key. It wasn't a difficult task at all. The secretary carried very little on his person. His executive access cards were always secured, his phone was always within arm's reach, and his keys were attached to a small metal ring inside his desk drawer. I quietly removed the warehouse key from the ring. Then I left everything else exactly where it was. After that, I simply went back to my mopping. 37 minutes later, I watched him slide open the desk drawer. He stopped, he checked the contents again. His calm expression didn't change at all. That was the truly annoying part about him. Most normal people became visibly irritated when they couldn't find something they needed. But he simply stood there, thinking. He calmly checked his suit pockets. Then he inspected the drawer once more, then the desk surface. Then he scanned the floor around his chair. I continued mopping the marble floor approximately 4 meters away from his desk. Eventually, his gaze shifted and he looked directly at me. I concentrated very seriously on scrubbing a completely non-existent stain. Have you seen my key? He asked. I glanced up with a blank expression. What key? The warehouse key. I considered pretending to not even know what a warehouse key looked like, but acting completely clueless would have been far too obvious. Instead, I casually pointed my chin toward the main hallway. Maybe you dropped it out there. Maybe, he murmured. He disappeared into the corridor. 5 minutes later, he returned to the room. He was still completely empty-handed. 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes. I was honestly beginning to thoroughly enjoy myself. Then he walked right past me and abruptly stopped. His sharp gaze dropped straight down to my cleaning cart. My inner smile vanished instantly. He crouched down low. He opened the bottom compartment of the cart. He pulled out a plastic spray bottle. Then he pulled out a cleaning cloth, then another chemical bottle. He found absolutely nothing. He stood back up to his full height. He looked directly into my eyes. I looked completely innocently back at him. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Exactly 30 seconds later, I heard a faint metallic click echo through the quiet space. I turned around. He was standing right beside his desk, and he was holding the warehouse key. I frowned deeply. He held it up high between 2 fingers. Looking for this, my stomach instantly sank. He hadn't actually found the key I hid. He had already known exactly where it was. The clever bastard had planted a second key just to trap me. I stared coldly at him. He smiled. Interesting. I narrowed my eyes at him. What exactly is interesting? You seem genuinely disappointed. I was simply hoping you would lose something important, I replied. How incredibly cruel. It's an occupational hazard. He smoothly slipped the key into his trousers pocket. Then he turned and walked away. I watched him go. Fine, game on, Mr. Secretary. The very next morning, I opened the bottom compartment of my cleaning cart and found something that definitely hadn't been there the previous night. There were 3 beautiful bouquets of fresh white flowers. I stared at them in utter disbelief. Then my eyes landed on the small note taped right to the handle. It read, "Your cleaning supplies seemed misplaced." I closed my eyes in frustration. He had completely replaced my disinfectant bottles with flowers, every single one of them. I picked up one of the bouquets. It smelled incredibly expensive. And I absolutely hated that I actually liked it. I marched straight toward his office. He was standing near the large glass window, calmly reading something on his tablet. I dropped the heavy bouquet of flowers right onto his desk. "What on earth is this?" He glanced down at them casually. "Flowers. I can clearly see that." "Then I am really not sure what the exact problem is. Actual cleaning supplies have completely disappeared," I hissed. "That is truly unfortunate. You replaced them with flowers. Perhaps someone simply thought the executive office needed a bit of brightening up." I leaned in closer over his desk. "Do I look like a florist to you?" His sharp eyes flicked briefly over my face, then they traveled down, then they came right back up to meet mine. "No," I waited for him to finish. Then he added, "Florists usually have much better equipment." I stared directly at him. He stared right back at me, and then very annoyingly he smiled. I reached down and aggressively grabbed a single flower from the desk. "Keep this. You have something to remember me by when I finally murder you." He looked down at the flower in my hand, then he looked back up at me. "That is surprisingly sentimental of you." I turned on my heel and walked right out of the room. Behind me I could hear him laugh. I absolutely hated that sound, mostly because, deep down, I really wanted to hear it again. The next round of our little war involved official company documents. I managed to reach the restricted executive archive room exactly 6 minutes before him. 6 minutes was more than plenty for someone with my training. I quickly photographed the file I needed, removed the original from the cabinet, and replaced it with a completely harmless duplicate. Then I hid and waited. Right on schedule, he arrived. He slid open the heavy metal drawer, then he stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes narrowed significantly. I watched his every move from behind a partially open storage closet door. He pulled out the folder, he opened it, he read through the first page, then he scanned the second, then he smiled. I immediately intensely disliked that smile. He closed the folder firmly. Then he walked directly toward my exact hiding place. I held my breath, my muscles tensing. He stopped just short of my door. Instead, he turned toward the ventilation panel right beside me. Then he simply walked away. I waited in the dark. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, finally I stepped out into the room. The file was completely gone, and so was he. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered. I immediately searched the entire outer corridor. There was absolutely nothing. Then my eyes noticed a small square of paper stuck right to the side of the filing cabinet. It simply read, "Too slow." I stared at the tiny note, my jaw tightened in frustration. Fine, I could absolutely play this game. Later that afternoon, I found yet another handwritten note. This one was tucked neatly inside the ventilation panel right above the executive corridor. It read, "Warmer." I looked at the tiny piece of paper, then I slowly, carefully looked around the hallway. There was nobody in sight. I pulled the ventilation panel open even farther. There was nothing there, except for the faintest, tiny reflection of something metallic deep inside the dark duct. It was a hidden surveillance camera. I froze in place. He had installed it, but why? I reached my gloved hand toward it, then I stopped, because taped right beside the lens was another tiny note. It read, "Don't." I stared at it. A sharp laugh escaped my lips before I could even stop it. "You are completely unbelievable," I whispered. Suddenly, a deep voice came from right behind me. "I have been told that before." I spun around instantly. He was standing at the very end of the empty corridor. His hands were buried in his suit pockets. He had that exact, infuriating expression plastered across his face. I pointed aggressively toward the high ventilation panel. "You put a hidden camera up there." "I did," he admitted calmly. "That is highly illegal. You are actively opening a restricted ventilation panel during official working hours." "I work here," I shot back. "So do I," he replied smoothly. "You are a secretary. You are a janitor." We stared fiercely at each other across the empty hallway. Then his sharp gaze dropped down toward my right hand. I realized with a sudden jolt that I was still holding the specialized screwdriver I had used to remove the security panel. His left eyebrow rose significantly. I slowly, casually lowered my arm. "Just standard maintenance," I offered, naturally. "There's something wrong with that." "Not at all," he murmured. Then his eyes narrowed with lethal precision. "I'm just surprised your maintenance department carries professional lockpicks." My heart gave one single, hard beat against my ribs. I hadn't even realized he had caught a glimpse of the tactical tools hidden in my palm. I forced myself to smile. "Some office stains are incredibly stubborn." He held my intense gaze for a long second. Then, "Apparently so," he murmured. He casually walked right past me. I watched him disappear around the far corner of the hallway. My smile faded instantly. The man was getting far too close, not physically, but professionally. He was noticing tiny details that no ordinary corporate secretary should ever be able to spot. And worse, I was beginning to notice highly specific things about him too. The distinct way he always checked reflective surfaces before entering dark rooms. The way he never stood with his back completely exposed to an open space. The way his sharp eyes automatically counted every available exit the moment he walked inside. The way his casual questions were always incredibly, carefully chosen. The man wasn't simply highly intelligent, he was deeply trained. Whatever it was he was investigating inside this corporation. He was exceptionally good at it. I thoroughly hated admitting that to myself. But somewhere between the stolen desk key, the expensive flowers, the fake documents, and the ridiculous notes hidden inside the ventilation ducts, my initial suspicion had acquired an incredibly irritating companion: respect. And I truly wasn't sure which one of those two feelings was more dangerous for me. By Friday, our little private war had become a complete daily routine. I secretly moved his morning coffee. He deliberately moved my cleaning mop. I switched the labels on his executive folders. He completely rearranged my chemical cleaning supplies alphabetically. I hid his primary access card. He found it inside my cart within 10 minutes and left a tiny note. It simply read, "Nice try." I opened my private locker the very next morning. There was another note taped inside. It read, "Getting warmer." I took a pen and aggressively wrote directly beneath it, "Getting annoying." The following morning, his witty reply appeared right under mine. "Mutual." I stared at that single word for several seconds, then I smiled completely despite myself. That was the real problem here. This intense game was no longer just about surveillance. We were both genuinely enjoying it. Neither of us trusted the other for a single second. Neither of us had forgotten the strange things we had witnessed. But every single time he managed to outsmart me, I immediately wanted to beat him. And every time I actually managed to beat him, I wanted to see whether he could figure out exactly how I had done it. It was becoming far less like hunting a criminal suspect, and far more like playing high-stakes chess with someone who kept moving the board on you. Then late Friday evening, I found something that changed absolutely everything. It was a restricted warehouse access record. For Warehouse 12, there was one major delivery listed. There were no listed contents, 3 heavy trucks, and all of them were scheduled for Saturday night. I stared intensely at the document. The secretary had been asking questions about Warehouse 12. I had literally seen him investigating its history, and now there was this hidden schedule. My field instincts immediately sharpened. Whatever was about to happen down there, it wasn't routine company business. I quickly copied the record. I closed the file firmly. Then I smoothly slipped the evidence straight into my bag. The very first thing I noticed about Warehouse 12 wasn't the armed guards. It was the heavy silence. It was far too controlled. Far too deliberate. A normal warehouse moving millions through legitimate business never slept. But it never held its breath either. This place did. I lay completely prone atop the rusted roof of an abandoned shipping office across the yard, my tactical binoculars resting against my eyes. There were 3 trucks, 8 heavily armed guards, 2 rotating perimeter patrols, and 1 elevated lookout. The bright floodlights left calculated pockets of deep darkness between the stacks of cargo containers. It was just enough room for trained personnel to move entirely unseen, but it was not enough room for amateurs. I lowered the binoculars and studied the hand-drawn layout in my notebook one last time. South entrance, maintenance corridor, security junction, server room, and finally the loading bay. If the company's altered financial manifests were actually accurate, every single dollar transfer scheduled tonight would pass through the central warehouse floor before disappearing into shell companies that existed only on paper. Tonight I needed hard proof, nothing more and nothing less. I checked the digital face of my watch. It was exactly 11:42 in the evening. It was finally time to move. The sleek tactical clothing felt strangely familiar after months spent inside oversized janitor uniforms. Black combat trousers, lightweight body armor hidden beneath a dark jacket, fingerless gloves, a compact camera, an encrypted transmitter, a silent tranquilizer pistol, a tactical knife, and a lock bypass kit. Every single tool sat exactly where my muscle memory expected it to be. There was no wasted movement. There was no unnecessary weight. I quickly crossed the rooftop, descended the fire escape without making a sound, and reached the rear perimeter fence. The heavy chain link mesh had already been cut open. I crouched low beside the opening. The cut was completely fresh. The steel edges were still bright where bolt cutters had recently bitten through the metal. Someone else had entered this property very recently, and it definitely wasn't security. Security guards repaired perimeter breaches. They didn't just leave them wide open. I remained completely still for several seconds, listening intently to the darkness. Nothing. Then I slipped smoothly through the gap. The yard smelled heavily of diesel fuel and wet concrete. 2 guards crossed the path roughly 50 meters ahead of my position. Their casual conversation faded away with every step they took. I moved forward only after their bright flashlights completely disappeared behind a stack of shipping containers. The western wall held the first surveillance camera. I raised a small wireless receiver to check its status. There was no signal. The camera wasn't transmitting any data to the guard shack. I climbed onto a utility box and inspected the device more closely. The wiring hadn't been cut at all. Someone had deliberately interrupted the loop feed internally. It was a temporary fix, highly professional, and very interesting. I continued moving quietly toward the main maintenance entrance. There was an electronic keypad protecting a standard 6-digit lock. My bypass tool connected to the interface with a quiet click. 4 seconds passed. A tiny green light flashed. The door was unlocked. I eased it open just enough to slide inside before locking it securely again behind me. I left absolutely no evidence, no trace at all. Inside, the heavy darkness swallowed everything beyond a few meters. The tiny beam from my penlight remained fixed on the dusty floor. Footprints. They were completely fresh. They belonged to heavy tactical boots. It was only one individual. A large stride, definitely a male. He had entered this building right before me, the secretary. That conclusion arrived in my mind almost immediately. Over the past week, I had seen more than enough to stop believing in coincidence. The secret midnight meetings, the high-end surveillance equipment, the constant questions about Warehouse 12. Whoever had entered this space first. I already knew his face. The maintenance corridor ended abruptly at the primary security junction box. I carefully removed the outer cover panel. Then I stopped. Several internal circuits had already been disconnected. They were cut very neatly. In fact, every single cable was carefully labeled before being moved aside. The main alarm relay had been completely isolated without triggering the automated backup system. I examined the intricate work in absolute silence. There were no shortcuts taken here. There was no unnecessary damage done to the board. Someone understood this security system almost as well as its original designers. I gently replaced the panel. He was definitely inside the building with me. Muffled voices suddenly drifted up from the main warehouse floor. I quietly climbed a narrow steel staircase leading toward an overhead maintenance catwalk. The entire view opened up directly beneath me. There were wooden crates, industrial forklifts, accountants walking around with barcode scanners, and heavily armed guards. Everything looked almost ordinary on the surface, until one large crate was pried open. Inside were thick bundles of foreign currency. Another crate was opened, dozens of legal passports, blank identity cards, official corporate seals, external high-capacity hard drives. There were even boxes marked with the names of companies that officially employed thousands of people. The ghost payroll network. Every single document matched the financial trail I had spent long months following. I immediately photographed everything I saw. Each digital image transferred instantly through an encrypted data burst transmission, if my camera survived the night. Good if it didn't. The evidence already had. Another large crate held handwritten ledger books. The pages contained secret payment schedules linked to offshore bank accounts, political foundations, consulting firms, international charities, layer after layer of deception. Money was disappearing, and massive corrupt influence was appearing. I turned another dusty page. My pulse slowed down. It wasn't out of fear. It was pure, absolute focus. This was exactly what I had been sent here to find. A faint metallic scrape echoed somewhere behind me. It wasn't below, it was level with me. I closed the handwritten ledger immediately. Someone else occupied the catwalk. No heavy footsteps followed the sound. Highly experienced, I stepped sideways behind a solid steel support beam. And I waited. Nothing. Busy warehouse continued moving beneath us. Forklifts, engines, orders shouted across the loading bay. Then another sound. It was much closer this time. I leaned just enough to see beyond the steel beam. Black tactical clothing, broad shoulders, a compact pistol. The secretary emerged from the opposite side of the catwalk, carefully examining another security panel. He wasn't searching around randomly. He moved with absolute purpose. Every glance was measured. Every corner was checked before he advanced. The man was definitely trained, definitely dangerous, definitely involved. He reached directly into the panel. He disconnected another circuit cable. The remaining cameras overlooking the eastern loading dock froze simultaneously on the monitor grid. He was actively securing the illegal operation. My final doubt disappeared. I slowly raised my tranquilizer pistol. Not yet. I needed him closer. I needed absolute confirmation. One step forward, then another. Suddenly, my boot brushed against a loose steel bolt. It rolled across the grated floor. The sound, though small, cut cleanly through the heavy machinery below. His tactical reaction was immediate. He disappeared behind a support column. It wasn't surprise, it was reflex and training. I moved at the exact same instant, taking cover behind another beam. Total silence, neither of us moved, neither of us spoke a single word. Seconds stretched out. The distance between us couldn't have been more than 6 meters. It was enough distance to kill, and it was far too close to miss. I counted his breathing pattern steady, controlled. He was undoubtedly doing the exact same to me. I shifted slightly to the left, he shifted to the right. Both of us leaned out from cover at exactly the same moment. 2 suppressed pistols rose simultaneously. Neither of our hands wavered. The sights settled squarely on center mass. Recognition came a heartbeat later. You, his deep voice remained entirely calm, and mine matched it. You. Neither weapon lowered an inch. His finger rested heavily against the trigger. And so did mine. You have been following me, he said. I could say the exact same to you. You have stolen classified company records. I have simply recovered evidence. You have been inside executive offices after midnight. So have you. Expression didn't change at all. You planted something on me, so he had found the tracking device. I wondered exactly how long it would take you. Enough, he murmured. Silence settled over us again. The loud sounds below faded into the background. There was only the lethal distance between our pistols. You disabled the security cameras, I said, and you searched the restricted archives. You interfered with my active investigation. You protected hers. His eyes hardened almost imperceptibly at my words. So that is what you think. I have watched you meet unidentified contacts. I have watched you steal evidence. I watched you install high-end surveillance. I watched you tamper with financial records. Every single sentence reinforced the exact same conclusion. He truly believed I worked for the CEO, and I believed exactly the same about him. There was absolutely no room left for misunderstanding, only action. My finger tightened. It wasn't enough to fire, but it was enough to prepare. His trigger finger moved too, just a fraction. Professionals always recognized intent right before movement. He knew, and I knew that he knew. Neither of us looked away. The first shot would decide absolutely everything. Then, a bright flashlight beam suddenly swept across our catwalk. It stopped. One of the armed guards below looked straight upward, his eyes widened in shock. Turned instantly across the warehouse. Another guard followed the path of the beam, then another. For one suspended heartbeat, every face below stared directly at us. A loud shout ripped through the warehouse. Intruders, safety catches snapped off loudly in every direction. Rifles rose. Heavy boots thundered toward the steel staircases. Neither of us lowered our weapons, but for the first time, neither of us was the most immediate threat standing on that catwalk.